For the atheist, is this an accurate steelman?
Oh, this sounds like a fun game to start the video with. Just in case you missed it, he said a steel man, which is the opposite to a straw man. A straw man is where you use the weakest arguments of your opponent to try to make them sound stupid or silly. Now a steel man is where you try to understand them the best you can, put them in the strongest position they are, and if you want to carry it on from there, you can then try to bring down the steel man. And if you can bring down a steel man, then there's nothing you can't bring down from their claim. It's usually the way I like to try and do things. I put myself into their position, I accept most of what they say, and then I try to understand if it still makes sense. Usually, it doesn't. But we're not going to be arguing about whether God exists or not in this video. We are arguing who has the burden of proof. Is it the theist, or is it the atheist? So let's see if he actually does do a steel man very well here.
For the atheist, is this an accurate steelman? An atheist cannot have faith in atheism.
I think we're onto a winner here. I've never heard someone who is a theist understand that there is no faith in atheism, that you don't need to have faith. It's the lack of faith. So this is a really good start so far. Maybe he will present a steel man.
One cannot accept atheism like a man accepts an apple or a jacket. It just is. A theist can accept the idea of deities, but an atheist cannot accept it, as atheism is just a lack of belief in deity.
Okay, so I accept that I'm being very picky here, but an atheist could accept a deity. It's just they haven't really been convinced right now. Someone who is currently an atheist hasn't been convinced. It's not that they cannot accept it, but atheists have become theists, and at that point they're not atheist anymore, but saying cannot kind of implies never will. Like forcefully never will. And that's not quite right, but he is trying to set up a steel man here, and I think he's doing good so far. I just wanted to point that one out, just to be completely honest. I'm basically saying it sounds like he thinks the minds can't be changed, but people's minds do change. On the other hand, I'm saying that for atheists in general. For me, I'd say I'll never become a theist, because I don't think proof will ever be met for a god, and not one worthy of worship either. So he's correct with me, definitely.
Atheism is the default position.
Also correct.
Theism introduces the claim that there are deities and must provide evidence to the atheist, since the theist has the burden of proof.
Yes, this is exactly it, and I don't see why you'd have a problem with that. We will be looking at the definition and who has the burden of proof as well, just to be clear.
When one claims an atheist has faith, it's illogical, as you cannot accept the lack of belief in something.
Yes, that's correct. It is illogical to say that we have faith in atheism because atheism is the lack of faith. The theist is the one claiming that something exists. The atheist is denying that claim. Before the theist, everyone was technically an atheist. I can understand the argument to state that an agnostic would be the default argument, because agnostic means unknowing, and an atheist is someone who doesn't believe in a god. But that makes it very clear that everyone was an agnostic atheist. They were unknowing of a god, and they didn't believe in a god. You can also be an agnostic theist. You can be unknowing of the god, but still believe that there is a god out there.
The steelman wants to show I understand what an atheist is saying here.
Good, and I agree here. I've added some things around, but I haven't really changed anything, and I'll stick to his steel man of an atheist, that's fine. But now, let's just have a look at the burden of proof. We understand his position of what an atheist is. The question is about who has the burden of proof, an atheist or the theist, so let's find out what we're trying to figure out here. The burden of proof is the obligation to prove one's assertion. Just in case, an assertion, a confident and forceful statement of fact or belief. Who has the burden of proof in an argument? The burden of proof is always on the person making an assertion or proposition. Shifting the burden of proof, a special case of argumentum ad interantium, is the fallacy of putting the burden of proof on the person who denies or questions the assertions being made. So because we're both debating that the other person has the burden of proof here, I thought I'd add in the fallacy. So either I am doing the fallacy of putting the burden of proof on you, and I actually have the burden of proof, or you're doing the fallacy of putting the burden of proof on me, when actually you do. And just before I let him continue, after I watched this video originally, I did actually go into the comments and tell him he's wrong. Respectfully, of course. And we did have a good conversation about it. We will quickly go over that at the end of the video, because we start to see where the confusion is.
But here's why individuals can still have faith in it and where it falls.
Oh, that's a shame. I was just beginning to like you, and then you go on about faith again. As if atheists have faith in something when we clearly have faith in nothing. Like, there is nothing to have faith in. But let's hear why. Why does he think atheists have faith?
Theism and atheism are binary opposing concepts. For one to reject one means to unknowingly accept the other. If one were to make a claim on theism with "I don't know," that person would be agnostic on the choices, but once an individual states they reject theism, they are actively choosing the other. Let's imagine a scenario where someone asks another who would have won the Super Bowl earlier in this year between the Chiefs and the Eagles. If they responded with "I reject" or "I don't think the Eagles will win," they unknowingly chose the Chiefs and vice versa. But if the individual decides to say "I don't know," they are neither rejecting or accepting any team. They are agnostic on it. A lot of individuals seem to be under the impression that one cannot accept it. Theism and atheism are still just beliefs.
An atheist and a theist are opposites, yes. Someone believes in a god, or gods, and someone doesn't. But an agnostic is not always just someone who's in between, like on the fence. I understand why so many people are confused about it. Even I was taught that at school. It comes from ancient Greek, and there it means unknowledgeable. It's the idea of not knowing whether there's a god, so the idea of "I don't know" is fine, but it's not somewhere between. You can be an agnostic atheist. I don't know if there's a god, but I still don't believe in one. I don't know if there's a god, but I believe in one. I cannot know for sure. You can be just an agnostic and be somewhere in the middle, but it's not the only way. I don't know, so I'll wait until I figure it out. A theist has to have faith because they haven't had any direct proof of God. They rely on other forms of evidence, personal experiences, and sometimes holy books, and maybe other things, depending on the theist. An atheist has faith, like you said, in no gods existing, because there's no need to believe in a god. There's no reason to do so, and with that, there's no need to have faith. Let's put it in reverse. I know you don't believe in a god with a physical being, timeless and spaceless and all, but let's say he took human form and exists right now. And don't get me wrong, this would be a straw man from me here, but we're not debating God's existence. It's just an analogy about faith. I'll accept even this God to exist. This God is a God that in our real world no one believes in, just to explain this analogy. He could fly around like Superman. Screw it, he could just teleport. He's immortal, he's indestructible. Give him all the powers or proof that you want. In a world like this, a theist does not have faith. He exists. He is there. He is the proof. An atheist denying that he is God will have to do so on faith. And I, very likely, still would. And then the burden of proof would most certainly be on me. However, we live in the opposite world regarding this. We don't have a God that has any proof. You're welcome to still claim there's a God, as I would be allowed to deny the God of the analogy. But like you didn't need faith in the analogy, I don't need faith here. I hope that clears up the faith issue.
Just beliefs on whether there are deities or not. Just because some individuals define atheism as the lack of, doesn't make it a default position with the theist needing to provide the burden of proof.
No, the default position is described by being the first position. Everyone was an agnostic atheist because they didn't know of a God and didn't believe in a God. And then someone came along and said there was a God. Whoever that was, the first ever person, brought about the concept of a God. That's why atheism is the default position. People who decided to refute that became, knowing that a God is a concept, decided it wasn't for them. So someone made a claim and an atheist denies that claim.
This would be equivalent to an orphan who never saw their parents rejecting the claim that people have parents. And it makes that the default since it's the lack of, with someone else needing to provide the burden of proof.
Kind of a dark analogy, but alright. If the orphan doesn't have any concept of parents, then he has no way to know. So if someone was to bring about the claim of parents, like that they exist, even if that person doesn't have any parents, yeah, the burden of proof is on the person making the claim.
The default position is irrelevant.
No, I don't think so, because you make the claim that a God exists, and then let's say you could prove it. and then we both agree that God exists. You then have to prove to me whichever religion you're from, which judging by your channel is Christianity, but I could be wrong. You'd then have to prove your religion to me, for us to both completely agree about the God we just proved.
And the burden of proof is only needed for the one who starts a claim in a conversation.
In a conversation? No, definitely not in just the conversation. If the burden of proof relies on me in this conversation, and I fulfill that burden of proof, then that burden of proof must affect the entire world, because that would be actual proof, wouldn't it? And I'm sure a conversation has the power to change the world, but it doesn't have to be just done every single time in a conversation as soon as someone claims or rejects a claim. Otherwise, scientists would really struggle talking about the Big Bang Theory, evolution, abiogenesis, and other such things like that, because every single time they'd have to provide proof before they can even continue their conversation. It doesn't make sense.
If an atheist decides to talk to a pastor all of a sudden, saying, I reject your evidence on God, they would have to provide the burden of proof since they started a claim. Their claim is that the pastor's evidence is not convincing or valid.
Didn't you just say that it's the atheist's job in this regard to provide proof, but then stated the pastor provided proof with evidence and the atheist rejected that evidence? It seems like your issue isn't with the burden of proof because you know the pastor should have provided the burden of proof. Because you just claimed that pastor accepted the burden of proof and provided evidence. Your issue is that we don't think the evidence is enough by the sounds of it. And you see, at that point, yes, if evidence has been presented, it would be on me, the atheist, or atheists in general, to tell you why that's not evidence or to accept it. I've never heard an atheist just go, no. Okay, it doesn't really work like that. That would be silly. An atheist would look silly doing that. They'd just look like grumpy, miserable old turds. But that's not what's happening. I have many videos on my channel where people present proof, what they call proof, and I tell them why that's not proof all of the time. And then they make the same claims over and over again.
Now, atheism is a claim.
No, atheism is a rejection of your claim. God does not exist in my mind. You're welcome to try and prove me wrong. Provide the evidence, and I will skeptically look at it. The reason for this is it's kind of like a peer review. And if me and you agree that a God exists or that a God doesn't, that doesn't make it true either. We'd have to find more. We'd have to have more peer reviews. The more people who peer review, the better to prove a statement. If you don't like that, tough.
Is the rejection on theism. There's a difference between rejecting theism and suspending judgment on it.
Just like there's a difference between making a claim against theism and simply rejecting it.
Once an individual rejects a claim of one of the two possibilities, they chose the other. An individual only has two options: is making a judgment call, rejecting atheism and accepting theism, or accepting atheism and rejecting theism.
Or, as an agnostic would, go about their life not caring at all. You can try and wordplay this however you like. You can try and change the words, trying to create a logical, linguistical sounding argument, but I think everyone in my family kind of believes in some sort of ultimate power of some sort of description. But they never taught me anything about it because they had nothing to teach. That was it. They just believed that maybe there's some concept of a higher power. But for me, it was never taught to me. I had no concept of God. But up until that point, I had no concept of God. The default position for a human being is an agnostic atheist. That's kind of the closest you can get to theism. It's the position you start off as a human being, as a species. Before God was a concept, maybe before we had language to talk about God, or to explore these creative ideas, an agnostic atheist was the default position. So under his video, I decided to start a conversation in the comment section, which I'm currently in the belief was just sort of a trap. There was a certain part in his video which was leading to a trap for anyone who tries to question him. So we'll have a look though. I do think that he was nice, he was respectful and everything like that, and in his video he sounded quite respectful too. He was trying to get in the shoes of an atheist and then try to debate it from there, which is a good thing to do. But nonetheless, I kind of feel like that one part was a trap. You'll see what I mean in a bit. My first comment was, respectfully, this is incorrect. Sorry, but as a person that went through life not describing myself as an atheist, not because I was something else, I was. I wasn't agnostic because I didn't believe in anything supernatural. Someone asked me if I believed in God. I was in a Baptist church for a sort of youth group. I said, "What's that?" Because I had no idea at the time what a God was. I was just there because it was a youth group. I was with friends. They then made the claim, explaining God, why is it that I suddenly have to defend myself for not believing what the person says? After the God claim could be proven true, there's another claim, which religion describes God. As you can be a theist and non-religious. Should I just believe them and that's it? It doesn't work like this with anything else. I was told about the Big Bang event. I didn't believe that either. The burden of proof was met, and I agreed with it. I still didn't like it, but I do agree that it happened. However, I would like to add that I don't truly believe that theists should be trying to prove God. This is kind of like a disclaimer. That would cause many problems. I think that it doesn't matter if he exists or not. I don't really care. My interests are learning about the universe. I want to know how it was created, and from my experience, theists block the answer. Not negatively, but they state God did it, and that's not the answer. If he did or didn't, I still want to know how. My point is theism and science don't need to conflict. Science requires a burden of proof for statements. Theism requires faith. If proof was acquired of God, then there would be no faith. Thanks for reading my thoughts. I thought I'd get one reply and then, I'd just leave it at that. But then he sort of doubled down. He said, I'm going to kind of go old wizard for his voice just to help differentiate. We've got a few other voices in here to try. The burden of proof is for anyone who makes a claim, atheist or theist. If an atheist comes to me and said, I believe there is no God, I don't have to prove that. He requires the burden of proof. It's just for conversation. See, when he put it's just for conversation, I forgot what he put in the video. But it's not just for a conversation, is it? This is something that people dedicate their entire lives to. Then we got someone else who's stating something, but atheism isn't the belief that there is no God. Some atheists do believe that though, and would have a burden of proof. I don't necessarily agree with the statement. I think he's a bit confused on what an atheist is. I think he's trying to describe an agnostic atheist maybe, or an agnostic theist. But I'm not sure. Anyway, he's not really part of the conversation. He sort of leaves at that point, I think. So then I reply to the original statement, the burden of proof is for anyone who makes a claim, and something about conversation. The burden of proof is over existence, not non-existence. Either there is a God that can be proven, or there is a God that cannot be proven, or there is no God which also cannot be proven. If you have proof, it is anyone's burden to be skeptical to prove its validity. Once no one can refute the claim of proof, that's when you can flip the burden of proof. Then he commented, that's why I gave an example of an orphan. If an orphan does believe that people don't have biological parents, doesn't mean people have to prove to them that parents exist. The orphan would still have to give the burden of proof. No, he doesn't. He's never had the concept of parents, so therefore doesn't know. Someone else makes a claim saying parents actually do exist, and the orphan would have no way to just believe that. You can't just have that orphan believe anything that's told to them. The burden of proof is on the one that makes the claim of something that exists. Anyway, the burden of proof is just a conversation staple for what parties agree to talk about, not some logical system that only atheists seem to believe. Well, we looked up what it was and what it means, so it's not just what atheists believe. It might be what you deny. Anyway, I'll continue with the comments. The orphan analogy doesn't work because he claims they don't exist. Someone comes along and corrects him. He says no. They have to prove that parents exist. So it is still the same. It doesn't work in your favor here. The atheist cannot disprove God. If nothing is found, then we can assume we haven't looked hard enough. Theist does have the potential to prove if they are correct. It all depends on who made the claim in a conversation first. If the orphan did, they would have to explain. If the people did, they will. It's not really a burden of proof. You can ask why they believe that, and then they can explain why. Like if the orphan came to me and said, but parents don't exist, I'd be like, what? Why don't you believe that? That's an odd thing to believe. And I'd ask why. It's not like an asking for proof. Then he'd tell me because I don't have any. I didn't even know that people did have parents. I didn't understand the concept of it. I'd be like, oh, okay, now I get the reason why you believe that. Let me show you the proof that people do have parents. And that would be some sort of revelation for the orphan as well, because if they didn't have the concept of parents, that must be really sad, because the orphan hadn't been orphaned recently. It means that they didn't even know their parents, which to me is really upsetting. But anyway, if the people did, they will. But no, the burden of proof still relies on me. I can ask him why he believes that, just to have an understanding of what I need to prove and how I need to do it, but no, how can the orphan prove parents don't exist? He couldn't prove that. He could research on his own and find out otherwise. That's true, but the burden of proof isn't his if he made the statement. So I reply, no it doesn't, that's not how it works. This is how it works. Yes, I actually had to give him an actual definition. The one that I read for you guys. Burden of proof is always on the person making an assertion or proposition. Now, I can admit that if we just look at this, it sounds like it's me or him. If I say, gods don't exist, that is a statement or an assertion. But it was also the default position. This is why I added the fallacy, because that is how the burden of proof works. Shifting the burden of proof, a special case of, I'm not even going to try and read this word again, this 3 words, is the fallacy of putting the burden of proof on the person who denies or questions the assertion being made. So you make a claim, and I deny it because there is no proof, but there could be proof, and I'm kind of expecting that proof to go with such a claim. Whereas, if we flip it the other way around and I make the claim there is no God, now I say there's no God and you deny it. Now I have to prove to you that there is no God. That's impossible. I cannot prove to you that there is no God. There is no evidence for a God, so I couldn't even do the research to figure it out. There just is no evidence for a God's existence. That's why you need faith in every holy book. That is why you need faith in pretty much every religion. Because religion and theism doesn't need proof. It's about belief. It's about faith. Having proof gets rid of that faith. So now he replied, and I'm glad he agrees with this, he put, no difference in what I said. If an atheist comes to me and says there is no God, they made an assertion. Whoever starts the claim first. No, you're doing the fallacy part, shifting the burden to the one denying the claim. God cannot be denied if it wasn't asserted first. So now he replied, I don't think you're using the burden of proof correct. Really? Are you sure? It's for all discussions, debates, conversations. Whoever starts a claim first, either an atheist or theist, can assert the beliefs first, as both can be claims. So we got another person here who seems to be on my side as well. He quotes his statement, if an atheist comes to me and said, I believe there is no God, I don't have to prove it. He requires the burden of proof. I believe there is no God. The proof... I don't know why I'm going with this voice. The proof to that statement is my belief in there not being a God. If I claim to know there is no God, then the proof for that would have to be something else than my beliefs. That's a fair point. There's a difference in denying his statement and the statement of there not being an actual God. Saying I don't believe you is different to saying there's not a God. I know he addressed it in the video saying that if you oppose my view, then you're the opposite, which is kind of true as well. But you're not making a claim if you're just denying his claim, which is what I've said earlier. So then I reply to the comment of the video creator, and then I put, lol, that's how we're using it. Debating God. I probably shouldn't have used the word debating because there are slightly different variations of it when it comes to that, but it doesn't really matter because he's making a statement, or he's talking about making statements. You claim God. Then I said no. I cannot say no God without someone claiming God. Otherwise, I'd have no concept of what I'd be denying. Shift the burden to atheists is shifting the burden to the ones who are denying it. That's the fallacy. If you don't want the burden of proof, that's fine, but don't shift to atheists. And his final reply, which I thought I had actually replied to, but it's not come up, so I'm guessing it hasn't actually replied. But anyway, his reply was, when have I claim in this conversation that there is a God? Which just shows that he's not actually listening to me at all whatsoever. And he was fixated on that trap right there, waiting for me to say, you claim God. And it wasn't even a legitimate claim. I was just stating it as a theist claiming God, because we're not talking about proving God right now. We're talking about the burden of proof. So I'm going to reply right now. We are talking about the burden of proof. Figuring out who has the burden of proof. Nowhere in the description I gave that you said was the same as your version-ish. About the burden of proof, does it say that a conversation is key to who has the burden of proof? It isn't. The claim that something exists is the potentially provable claim. For me, to have the burden of proof would be impossible. I cannot prove the non-existence of something, be it God or Bigfoot. Having a burden of proof is incredibly important. It allows evidence to be shown when relevant, and that evidence to have a skeptical assessment. If a skeptic cannot disprove, then many must be skeptical to further prove its validity when they cannot disprove it either. And I think for now I'll leave it at that. If he continues to reply, I may continue the conversation. But honestly, I doubt it. Because even if I tried to reply and he hasn't actually tried to learn anything, then the conversation isn't going anywhere. I feel like I'm just explaining myself over and over again, and he just keeps sticking to the same story of it's all about a conversation. Whoever makes the claim in a conversation first. If someone in a conversation came up to me and said, if I was in a conversation with someone and I said the earth was a sphere, and someone told me that I was wrong, he is denying my statement. No matter how true it is, he's denied me. It's not his burden of proof to prove that the earth isn't a sphere. My burden of proof to tell him that it is. If he makes the claim the earth is flat, or dinosaur-shaped, or donut-shaped, it's then his burden of proof because he's made a claim. I cannot ask the person denying the earth is a sphere for proof without him stating that something else exists instead. As for why I haven't put the comment onto the screen right now, the one that I just went through that I was typing at the time, and this explains why the other one wasn't visible for me to see again. Every time I write a comment now, it doesn't appear. It seems like I've been banned or shadow banned or whatever you want to call it. But either way, I can no longer be in this conversation, so I'm glad I decided to make a video. It seems like the usual sort of thing. He's sticking his fingers in his ear, going la 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 la, you're wrong. But I thought I'd add this in just as I was editing this video. I found out when I was going through the comments trying to gather them all, that my comment still hadn't gone through. I've tried to type another one, it still won't go through. I thought that might be important to let you guys know. Anyway, I have a headache now, so if you have anything else you'd like to add, maybe I missed it, maybe you disagree with me, feel free to add it in the comments, and I'll see what I can reply to. Otherwise, there are 2 videos on screen right now, feel free to click on one, and I'll see you there after I've taken some paracetamol. Thanks for watching!